Welcome back, homies. 1 down, 3 to go as we move into our SMITE minor league. Still on the European side of things. I have traded out my taco for an Anatoly. How you doing today, bud?
Pretty good. I'm feeling good after that last Flashpoint 2-0 victory over K. So this time around, OutCold Gaming versus Simplicity should be another interesting one.
OutCold Gaming versus Simplicity is going to be our next matchup. And watching these two go head-to-head for a while has been a little bit interesting as we move on and look towards what OutCold is able to do. What have you noticed about Simplicity across the way? What can you tell us about their draft or their roster?
I think that genetics sometimes is hot or cold. He'll play these aggressive supports and sometimes will help his team win games, and then other times just straight up lose their team games. And I think on the other side as well, OutCold Gaming having a different support as well now that it's going to be ßreez instead of Half Devil.
Well, I'll touch on that in just a little bit, but Simplicity is certainly a strong team in their own right. maniaKK, ex-professional player, Genetics was on the team that Lasper played on that got him noticed in Signum. DeathPanter, of course, the patron saint of the minor league and has had some time in the pro league as well. So a lot of good stuff going for Simplicity as far as this roster is concerned, but they haven't been able to bring the wins.
Not quite yet. They are currently with OutCold Gaming at 1-1 apiece in record-wise. Week number 1, it was OutCold Gaming finding the 2-0 victory. Week number 5, it was Simplicity finding a 2-0 for themselves.
Tough stuff there for Simplicity as they try and bring it back. Faeles in the jungle, also a notable player. Totally, you were just bringing up some of the roster changes OutCold has seen. PrettyPriMe still in that mid lane, but the changeover in the support role, ßreez. So ßreez formerly played for Fnatic in the Heroes of the Storm world, brought home a world championship, but a very different MOBA. That's going to be top down and kind of team-oriented. SMITE, all action, baby. No auto attack, no auto aim. You got to hit your stuff, but also a very different approach to the game. That said, I think some of the mentality he has from the other games will bring over.
I think that competitive nature should transition well, especially for OutCold Gaming that has the experience. You got Dimi, you got PrettyPriMe as well. These two specifically have been at Worlds plenty of times, Dimi winning 2 of those Worlds. So despite ßreez specifically in that support role, having very minimal amount of time playing SMITE compared to, let's say, other SML players, I think just him having the competitive nature, his ability to fill that role, should be interesting to see how he meshes.
Exactly. When he played for Fnatic on Heroes of the Storm, similar games but not exactly the same. Utility is a lot of what we saw out of ßreez when he was playing for Fnatic. So I'm very interested to see if he's going to bring that playstyle over to SMITE or different game, different world, and it's just all aggression or all backline. That is the biggest thing that I'm interested to see is to see what playstyle he comes out with this game, because we know what to expect from HOT. So he's going to be very utility and bring some of those oddball choices. Curious to see if that translates over to SMITE. As he joins PrettyPriMe and the rest of the squad, very strong players in their own right. But again, Toli, all these Pro League players, as they struggle to find wins, picks and bans for game number 1, what's the biggest problem for OutCold?
For OutCold specifically, I think it's just how literally hot or cold that they can become from time to time, right? Like FrostiaK is in the same realm of genetics where he can have a great day or he can lose his team the game, and that's where OutCold kind of falters sometimes.
I feel like I would agree with. I still agree with you. I'm not going to outright disagree with you, but I would agree with you more over the past 6 years. This has been one of the more exciting points to watch FrostiaK because I think he is a little bit more consistent. And as we look at this minor league place and realize that it's farm fodder for teams up in the pro league level, I think FrostiaK could get some secondary glances. I think he's really been playing very, very strong, and despite that OutCold hasn't had the wins, he's certainly one of the players that can stand up in his own right. Simplicity will begin the draft by taking Bellona as they ban out Arthur and Artio across the way. Xbalanque and Merlin take it away. So now OutCold Gaming here looking for what they can select, and it will be overall their first choice.
Bellona, no stranger to maniaKK specifically. I love this first pick. Achilles still available if Dimi wanted to go for it, but you never really know where Dimi is going to go. That could also be going, I think, to FrostiaK, honestly, at the end of the day. That is an aggressive jungler if he wants to play it that way, and FrostiaK is aggressive by nature, which I think should allow ßreez maybe in the support role to play more of a peel-centric kind of guardian, look for ways to help out PrettyPriMe in the backline, and allow FrostiaK to do the dirty work.
Fafnir the choice for Simplicity, alongside Rum, so some real traditional basic attack and some basic attack help. Bellona on the same side ensures that you're not going to get disarmed at a bad time as well. So Simplicity with a nice cohesive draft at the moment. P.S. Bellona, one of the most winningest characters in the Pro League as well, so minor league taking some notes. Ratatoskr will be the jungler of choice, most likely for OutCold Gaming, some semi-global capability, and of course just chase down, man.
Global pressure never a bad thing in SMITE, so Ratatoskr goes a long way. Also flex possibilities to go in the solo lane if Dimi wants to play it. Doubt we're going to see that coming out of Breeze. We have seen Ratatoskr in the support role from time to time. Not really in Season 6. We've seen more other kind of assassins between the Fenrirs, the ßreez, the Naja specifically. So probably going to play a more standard Guardian, I would say.
Fafnir is really the type of character, again, just going off of what he's done in HOTS and understanding that it's a very different world here. Fafnir is a very similar type of character that we would expect him to play. Kind of utilitarian, but more kind of in between. Kuzenbo just could be the choice, honestly, with that in mind. Understanding that utility and control is what he likes to bring. Simplicity here, though. Poseidon, big burst damage, a little bit of control as well in that middle lane. And looking for one jungler of choice. Simplicity will go with Arachne.
Arachne getting a lot more popular, I would say, since the beginning of Season 6 when they saw adapting play it to great success, I would say. And this has been a good look, I would think, for Kuzenbo on Breeze, knowing that the Watery Grave has so much knockup potential. It's just got great control with a Sumo Slam. And interesting to see Simplicity lock the Poseidon into a Kuzenbo, knowing that the Spike Shells is going to be saved for that Kraken.
Spike Shells also will do a nice job against Arachne as well. We'll see which comes through. But OutCold Gaming Simplicity, some new players making their debut. Let's jump right into game number 1. Ready, set, go.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Toli, Finch, and Taco here. Moving into game 1, Simplicity up against OutCold here in the last set for the EU Minor League. And like they said, you're going to see some slightly different looks around here, so try and get used to it. Breeze going to be in that support role, and we'll see how well that can work for OutCold. Formerly Half Devil was in that slot, but some different looks here, Taco.
It's trying something new out, and I don't fault OutCold for it. I think that they kind of reached a point with Half Devil where the team just has to make a decision. Well, maybe we're going to try something new out and see if we have a little bit better success with that. Half Devil might just need a little bit more time, I think, getting or shaking off some of that rust from before he took that initial SMITE hiatus, I think.
Sure. That certainly could be the case here, and OutCold going to be taking a look to see how well Breeze can do for them. We are seeing the reflection of the SPL start where the supports are hanging out in the solo lane. This has been done much more. It's been such a big thread for me is where the supports are early, what's the best use of their time, do we continue to let these hunters have that solo farm, are we ganking over there, all those threads that come from the switch up from the normal duo lane start. And so far, it looks like they're going to be following along. They've left Spudio and StreakUp to their own devices on the Rama and Jing way.
Yeah, maniaKK getting a little bit poked out there from a couple of those sumo slams from Breeze. Gotta be mindful as the Bellona when you're looking for that bludgeon clear, not to have it get interrupted. And maniaKK, unfortunately, just having to deal with this Kuzenbo for probably a few minutes longer. I doubt that Breeze is going to be rotating out anytime soon here with Dimi. I actually want to take a look over at Faeles on this Arachne because Arachne is known for her early game cross, and when you're able to really punish the enemy team by just constantly invading their back harpies, eventually that little bit of experience builds up to pretty serious leads. So I'm actually curious to see if Faeles' intent is going to be looking for some of those early game invades.
The invades probably would favor Arachne, but to be fair, that early game presence, as soon as FrostiaK hits 5, is almost certainly going to be favoring this Ratatoskr with the Through the Cosmos. So as you sort of as you're alluding to, that question becomes then, is Arachne's control of the jungle going to prevail over that gank potential that FrostiaK's going to have, and how well these side lanes can play safe and make sure that they're not under too much duress once those ultimates start coming through from FrostiaK?
Well, that actual discussion brings me back to Breeze, because this Kuzenbo pick feels like it's going to be really critical when dealing with the entirety of Simplicity's composition. A lot of auto attack based focus here.
Yes, heavily.
From the Arachne, Rum, even genetics to help boost with the Fafnir in that draconic form. A maniaKK arguably even could opt for being a heavy participant of that attack speed. So Simplicity definitely going to be trying out some of their earlier tower sieges or maybe even earlier objective burn. OutCold can't afford to be caught sleeping.
No, they can't, and you're right, that does put a lot of pressure then onto Breeze to sort of step up as the newer member to this roster and make sure that he's able to deliver, because that's what Kuzenbo can do so well. He's such a disruptor. He just sticks on that back line, particularly, I think, onto StreakUp, and he's basically going to be trying to tell StreakUp, you don't get to be in these fights. He's got the reflect damage up. He might even itemize into the Thorns, though in the support he might not. He's got the Shell. That's already upgraded, so that'll alleviate some of those auto attacks too. So he's definitely doing what he can to minimize StreakUp, and, like you said, Faeles as well. Either one of them, I think, would be viable for him to spend some time on.
I'm actually glad you mentioned the Hunters, Finch, because lately I've noticed that Hunters have been doing this new start lately of just trying to rush boots outright. No longer really looking for getting the initial starter item of like the Morning Star or even the Spike Gauntlet to build into Devils later on.
Yeah.
A lot of players just trying to prioritize boots, and I think it's for mobility and just an early game power spike. It allows for a lot of boxing opportunities that I don't think you could normally take as a hunter prior to level 5.
It feels so counterintuitive to me, because now that they're left alone, they have all this time to farm. I'd want to go even greedier, you know, with like my stacking items. But maybe it's like an arms race. Now that it is just the 1v1, if they go boots and you don't, then they'll almost certainly be able to pressure you out. So maybe it's like sort of like this like arms race where like who flinches first.
Spudio is definitely expecting to not really have to worry about hard CC lockdown, I think, so much as he's just going to have to worry about finalize killing blows. There isn't really a whole lot of like heavy CC for Simplicity. They're kind of just relying on bursting down OutCold faster than what OutCold will be able to have a chance to respond to.
That's right. Genetics have to make sure he truly comes through in that dragon form to find the lockdown, whether it's with that spit, whether it's with the jump as well, the underhand tactics. He'll have some tools to set up for them. Probably the biggest deal will be DeathPanter, though, on that Whirlpool and that Cripple field, if he can stop the dashes from just about everyone and try and lock them in on the side of OutCold. So that's what this team's going to have to make sure they're really worrying about, I think, is DeathPanter in this Whirlpool.
Well, DeathPanter's already elected for the CDR boots and the mage, so that leads me to believe, Finch, that he's definitely looking to go more utility-based for Simplicity, and I agree with that. I don't think that DeathPanter needs to be the star performance player. Well, DeathPanter trying to make some action happen on defending his purple buff. Genetics invest the Draconic form, but there's really no possible way for them to follow it up. FrostiaK just gets out scot-free.
Yeah, but I think that was FrostiaK's gank attempt. His ultimate's down, his blink was used on the disengage as well. Genetics had to use sprint and, like you said, his own ultimate, but StreakUp, for what it's worth, didn't use his ult or his beads to get away from that. So whatever was going on with FrostiaK on that side we didn't quite get to see, didn't quite pan out for him.
I'm pretty sure that FrostiaK was just spotted out early on from Genetics when Genetics was rotating in for the purple buff farm, so instead of trying to collapse onto the Rum, Frosty tries to make a play, just like OutCold are trying to do right now onto Simplicity, and I'm surprised Simplicity just not backing off, still trying to position themselves fairly aggressively on this solo side.
At the very least, maniaKK wants to battle over this Totem of Ku, which means Dimi will give it up for now. The Bellona with the bludgeon obviously can do damage to both the Totem and to Dimi at the same time. So a hard trade for Dimi to win. He'll just back off on that one and give over the Totem of Ku. But Taco, kind of to your point, that was that power spike I highlighted earlier where FrostiaK had that ultimate. I think that was the first time we saw him use it and really didn't find much of anything of relevance with it, whether it was used for the buff or on a gank attempt. Either way, he hasn't made use of that early spike. That means now Faeles on this Arachne can feel comfortable for a little while looking around for some buff invades.
But FrostiaK is with a slight experience lead over Faeles, so it's not going to be easy come, easy serve either for Faeles. I think he's definitely going to still have to work for it with this Arachne, but I do agree for the most part, Finch. I don't think that FrostiaK or Faeles have really been able to give that early game presence that you would expect traditionally from the Ratatoskr or from the Arachne. And I think that's also partially credited to the fact that both of these teams' side lanes are playing incredibly well and very smart. They're not overextending or giving those opportunities.
Well, here's gank attempt number 2, and I think it's the red buff on the menu. Genetics knocked up, and Breeze right there to help out, but no lockdown available. FrostiaK caught inside the Kraken, but not the actual knock-up, and no more damage comes through from Faeles, but he is up on the web and looking for a target. That's quite scary when the Spider starts looking around, drops the slow, and Breeze has the ultimate available and makes his way out of there. But look for the snipes from long range. It's just not enough damage. DeathPanter's the one in trouble, but they find FrostiaK either way. DeathPanter grabs first blood.
FrostiaK got a little bit baited in there. I think he thought that DeathPanter was a guaranteed kill confirmation for that first blood. Instead, he just winds up getting turned and burned. Simplicity kind of lucking out there. I also don't think that PrettyPriMe was able to find the bombs that he was hoping for in that choke point.
It did feel like maybe he was a little bit too far in that engagement for whatever the reason was. Part of the problem was that OutCold didn't quite get the knock-up they wanted to start that fight off. They hit genetics, and I still think Fafnir's like a fine target at this point in the game, but they were not all in. DeathPanter gets a really nice ultimate to like kind of stop FrostiaK's damage and Spudio's as well, and that kind of cut off everyone else.
FrostiaK kind of just came crashing down from that through the Cosmos because I think he wanted to fake out Simplicity, make them believe that there's going to be more members following him into that red buff area, and then once he realized that there's 4 different members from Simplicity that could be available any given second, Frosty tries to disengage. That baited DeathPanter into a pretty awkward choke point. Honestly, by that left side mid Harpies, it was just unfortunate, I think, that off of Breeze's watery grave, I believe that kept PrettyPrime's Agni bumps just a little bit too far away since they were on the tail end of that. And DeathPanter for being...
Like actually getting pushed away a little bit, yeah.
Yes, and DeathPanter was actually like pushed backwards, which I think trapped FrostiaK thinking that he could go back in and escape through the mid lane, but it just CC'd almost instantly.
Yeah, I don't know if FrostiaK just could afford to come back in there, but it looks like that won't deter them from trying again on this red buff invade. Faeles is here, so is DeathPanter, but the position advantage favoring OutCold. They can't get all the way in to grab the buff, so Simplicity should be able to force them back, but no, this is a hard commit. FrostiaK has ulted and Faeles is already at half HP, but instead he goes right to the back line, forces DeathPanter to waste the Kraken at his feet to buy space. Faeles drops down on top of Prime to drop the slow, but the red buff still stands.
StreakUp gonna go ahead and roll in though, and 3 members of OutCold now starting to pull away at the red buff.
Whoa.
Simplicity won't be able to defend it this time, but FrostiaK's gotta watch out for Genetics, who's right on top of him.
A little bit of help from that Whirlpool. He almost brings him down. StreakUp goes up, and FrostiaK goes down. The snipe from the sky, more than enough. Simplicity now with 2 on the board, and OutCold twice in a row try and force this fight around red.
And it just feels exactly that, forced. OutCold lose their jungler. Sure, you get the timer of that red buff, but is it really worthwhile to sacrifice FrostiaK for a second time now? This Ratatoskr still is maintaining a little bit of an experience lead because Faeles is missing out on some of his map farm because of the invades, but I just don't really see this being a sacrificial lamb that OutCold can afford to maintain as their sacrificial lamb.
I agree. It has not yet bore fruit from them, this extra pressure on the red buff. So they might need to hit the drawing board, especially considering they're losing a Pyromancer for the trouble. Simplicities recognize another small window where they can burn it down. And we talked about this auto-attack focused comp, this basic attack focused comp for Simplicity, and how that might cause them trouble up against Breeze. But they don't have to worry about Breeze around like these objectives and that sort of thing. This Fafnir, and I mean not just even StreakUp and Faeles, but even DeathPanter on the Poseidon, they're gonna have tons of extra damage onto these objectives.
I think it was 8 seconds or less on even
fast.
the first Pyromancer, and this is before StreakUp even has, you know, any serious auto attack boosting items.
You're right,
it's
he didn't
still
really have
working
any.
on the Aussie or the Executioner, could be looking for that double lifesteal. Meanwhile, Spudio, I think, is going to go the Odysseus bow that we've been seeing pretty often. But I just don't think that OutCold can really afford to continue losing one member even, because with a 4v5 advantage, Simplicity can just murk an objective in like no time at all, and you just don't have that sort of time to give up.
You certainly don't. The good news for OutCold, though, is that they still have, despite only being down 1,700, so it's certainly not doom and gloom at all, but they certainly have things they can play to. They're going to have this Agni in the late game with these bombs. That control is going to be so strong, so much damage from him from range. That's going to be hard for Simplicity to match. And they're still going to have, like we said, the Kuzenbo going into this attack speed as well. And once they start getting things like Aegis is online and maybe even another shell, the Kraken becomes less scary from DeathPanter. They've got great tools.
Something else that I've noticed, though, is that in the few times that OutCold has tried to force the engagements, FrostiaK hasn't been able to really pull relics. Simplicity are staying level-headed despite all of this OutCold gaming aggression, and that DeathPanter, he just drops the Kraken on top of himself. It's early game still. This Kraken is more than enough, I think, to kind of just 180 the situation back into Simplicity's favor. So OutCold also need to be mindful that they're not continuously overstepping their boundaries, because I think it's okay. You don't really get as punished in the early game for a couple of odd-ended forced engagements, but you'll definitely feel that when the respawn timers start hitting 30 seconds or more.
Exactly. When they're missing all that farm or they're not there for fights, it'll certainly hurt. And I like that they've been liberal with this DeathPanter ultimate as well. It's not as, I don't even know if they're going to miss it for confirm with how quickly they burn objectives. Like, normally you want to hold your big mage objective or your big mage ultimate, and if you use it, then the other team's like, well, at least they're not going to feel comfortable going for, you know, Gold Fury or Pyro. This squad, with how fast they burn them down, might still feel pretty good about it.
But it could just be the cherry on top. If you're trying to contest an enhanced Fire Giant, for example, something that I think a lot of teams in competitive play have certainly struggled with in Season 6, because it's a tanky boy. FG is beefy this season. You need every ounce of damage.
Yo, did he follow your lifetime plan? Is that what that was, Taco? He got beefed up?
No,
in the off-season?
No, just wait. All right? This isn't even my final form yet. Or the Fire Giants, all right? You thought enhanced was bad. Well, let me tell you guys what's going to happen in summer.
That's right. Taco's got to get ready when she's got to have them guns out. But you're right. I mean, the Fire Giant is kind of tougher for teams to take nowadays.
And that's the thing. DeathPanter having this Kraken is just another win more tool for Simplicity to possibly have. For OutCold, on the other hand, you're kind of relying on PrettyPriMe as your only serious form of contest. I think FrostiaK can provide a little bit of interrupt, but it's a lot more difficult to steal an objective through the Cosmos, I think, than having to do it into a potential Kraken as well. Can you imagine FrostiaK comes crashing down, trying to challenge an objective, and the next thing you know, he's like at 30% health because he had to also absorb the full blow of a Kraken.
That's right. So it's some nice tools available to Simplicity to try and contest around, even if they're not the ones pulling it, as you said. I like, though, that this team has not shied away from the auto attacks at all, despite the Kuzenbo. It's just traditional builds, the Ninja Tabai and the Berserker Shield for the Bellona. She's leaning right into it. Faeles is following that build we first saw Adapting do, where it's no boots at all. You just Golden Blade, Stone Cutting, Hastened, and you don't even need to worry about picking up boots. You'll have more movement speed overall. Even the Executioner from StreakUp, they're not afraid to lean into that attack speed.
Ooh, could be dangerous. For Spudio even. Don't think that he was aware of the fact that Genetics is hugging that dual wall corner, but gonna choose to back off anyway. Pretty sure Spudio just wanted to back and buy to base, already starting to invest into what I believe is going to be an Executioner for the Jing. And speaking of Spudio, Finch, I actually wanted to talk to you about this because a sole Jing to try and match the attack speed, and I just have a lot of concerns that Spudio is going to have more issues with Faeles than what he will StreakUp.
That's going to be a big problem for him, yes. I did want to talk to you about Spudio, too, because we've seen this Odysseus bow third item a little bit more at the pro level, and it's something that I don't think works at every level of play, because Executioner in that slot, Igvile in those slots, those items are so strong. If you're giving that up for the Odysseus bow, you have to be guaranteeing that you guys are team fighting around it.
Odysseus bow third item 100% feels like a competitive play-based build, and I try to stress that to people. Like, you shouldn't just copy-paste what you see the pros do and expect it to work out for you in your casual and ranked games, but a big reason behind this Odysseus bow in the third item slot is because at this level of play, you have the communications with the rest of your team to sort out player damage on god targets. You lose a little bit of power early game, but you have so much sustain from the attack speed and the Devil's Gloves combined that it makes it fairly effective when you're trying to look for those early game objectives. Spudio could probably solo the Gold Fury right now if he's given enough time. Granted, I don't think Simplicity are going to allow him that leisure, but it's just the thought that's there. I also love Odysseus bow in competitive play because on the smaller scale of things, having the branch off autos or the little branch off streaks of the Odie bow passive can interrupt with the blinks.
Exactly. It can put them in combat so they're less likely, or so that they're not able really to use those blinks to the engages, so it certainly can be another strong element. In this game, it's only Faeles he's worried about in that department so far, but could certainly still be one of Genetics chooses to go that route, though. Another team fighting relic would not hurt at all. I was expecting to see OutCold look for another fight around that Odysseus' bow, but those first couple of times they tried it sure didn't pan out, so maybe they're slowing things down.
Well, here's the thing, though, Finch, is that OutCold were aggressive, like you said.
Yeah.
Maybe even silly aggressive, since Simplicity were able to punish them fairly effectively for it.
Sure.
But I think that OutCold actually allowing the slower paced game to happen is more favorable for Simplicity than what it is for OutCold. I think that OutCold should be trying to force more engagements, maybe not necessarily in Simplicity's jungle, but the Gold Fury, for example. I think that this is something that OutCold could have already started to began positioning around or even looking towards, because Simplicity were at his point, I think, before StreakUp finished the Executioner, started working on his fourth item, that they might have been able to be more favored in an engagement, but as it currently stands, this Gold Fury's just gone.
That's so fast! They never even had a chance to get in there. Genetics lands one stun. That's a free Gold Fury for Simplicity. And that means now FrostiaK's ultimate's on cooldown. Look how fast they vanish like bandits in the night. They're out of there, Taco.
And that's exactly what I meant by OutCold need to be the ones forcing the objective play. You can't let Simplicity do anything.
They don't have time to be reactive.
That's the thing. If they group with even 3 members, you only need Faeles and StreakUp with Genetics. That's it. And they'll take any objective. So OutCold have to be the ones being proactive on these global objectives.
I like the idea of coming back to the objective, but not a ton was used by Simplicity. The Draconic Corruption being down is certainly strong, but they still have plenty of presence here in this fight. OutCold want to try and force this fight around the Pyromancer. Dimi locked in the 1v1 with Faeles on the right, but OutCold the ones that grab the Pyromancer, and that might be all she wrote. Simplicity couldn't find a way in, and they'll settle with their Gold Fury.
All that attack speed from Spudio paying off right now, big time. It's just Spudio and the Agni damage out of PrettyPriMe. That's all it takes for OutCold to have their own fair share of contention on these objectives, but I still think that doesn't sit well with OutCold. Sure, you get a Pyromancer, but I'm certain OutCold would have loved the Gold Fury even more.
Something else to try and slow this team down, but they couldn't quite find it. Simplicity is further leaning into this attack speed-oriented build. Shogun's now picked up for maniaKK, and that's interesting. We often see the supports pick that Shogun's up for the squad because they're kind of around the carries a little bit more often, but it's Gem of Isolation for Genetics in that third slot.
Well, Genetics pulling the infamous Dardis special, or I shouldn't even really say Dardis. Collis does the same thing from time to time.
Yes.
They're both fans of this Gem of Isolation Fafnir. I can't say that I disagree. I mean, for Genetics, there hasn't really been too many team fights that have happened so far for OutCold. It's really just been both of these teams. Whoever gets the positioning first on the objective gets the objective. Simplicity not really trying to overstep or risk, I think, falling behind when they're in such good standing right now. And I prefer to see the Shoguns on the Soul Laner this time, only because of the fact that it's Bellona.
Right, and she synergizes so well with that extra attack speed. It's going to need a little bit of help when Agni and Kuzenbo are dropping all that extra damage, so certainly doesn't hurt for it to be on maniaKK as long as it's somewhere. Another interesting one is both of our mages this time have picked up the Shaman's Ring as well. Certainly a strong item, but we see a good amount of. Do you like it here on both of these?
I think it's fair. You can't be mad at it, but
It's good damage.
Faeles.
Whoa! He was there. Now he isn't.
Faeles looking like objective number 4 right now.
That's right.
I don't know. That was too fast for my liking, Finch. But with that pick alone, OutCold now able to siege this T1 tower in mid. And keep in mind, there's only 3 kills so far on the scoreboard. But we are well past the mid-game mark, I think. And both of these teams, with most of their carries approaching that level 20 mark or being right on top of it, you just have to expect that if somebody gets caught, they're probably just gone.
You can get blown up very quickly nowadays. Yes, you're right. Faeles just attested to that for all of us. And unfortunately, he ends up taking a spill, at least only unfortunately for Simplicity. OutCold certainly happy to be able to find the bug and put her down. Faeles gonna have to take a bit of a seat. But I'm glad to see that OutCold finally were turning the gas back on a little bit again. They found themselves picking the jungle. They took the tier 1 tower on the back end of that as well. They can't just let Simplicity allow Faeles to slowly build up and become a scary late game Arachne.
Well, he's already gotten away with doing a triple katana build, though, Finch. In my mind, Faeles has already succeeded with this Arachne.
Love it.
The fact that he did not get punished. The hasten strikes me as a little bit odd, but I guess that's kind of just more a staple item on Arachne at this point, because Faeles wants to be able to consistently stick to Spudio, PrettyPriMe. Those are probably going to be his primary targets. Maybe even Dimi. Depending on whether or not Simplicity have a clear advantage in a team fight or not. Sometimes you can just blow up the front line.
Right, if they're isolated, and certainly someone like Faeles could. We saw him trading out with Dimi earlier, and it wasn't quite going his way, but the later this game goes, he might get better and better at that one. He has the kin size completed down to chew through all that extra help as Bulwark is picked up for Dimi. Another item we don't see nearly as much of, I feel like, anymore, but it is still real good at what it does, which is let you live through a bunch of bursts all at once.
And I think that's all that Dimi's trying to do, is to survive this Kraken, and even genetics with the attack speed, but it is a lot of crowd control reduction as well, and I think CCR is going to be super important when you're dealing with a double gem of isolation composition. DeathPanter just now finishing off his gem is going to make OutCold miserable, I think.
Wow, double gem. You're right. Those slows will be egregious. Wingblade already picked up for Dimi. That's a great pickup to respond to this heavy reliance on slows. But the Gold Fury is already low. They got to find their way in. OutCold has secured the objective, but now for the punish on the back end. Faeles blinks right on the Spudio, who has to airstrike away to safety. maniaKK has Dimi in the whirlpool, but it's nowhere near enough. OutCold grab the Gold Fury, and Simplicity never make it in.
Simplicity don't seem all that upset by it, though, and they're going to instead take a gander towards this T1 in mid. OutCold is in position to try and defend. Dimi hovering that left-hand side. Simplicity don't want to go all in just yet, understanding that OutCold do have the side flank positions ready to go.
Yeah, they OutCold just didn't use enough to justify Simplicity trying to force a fight there. Only Spudio ult is what was forced out by Faeles, and Faeles' blink is on cooldown to trade that one out too, so it's difficult for them to just straight up force that fight. In fact, OutCold recognize that they've given up the positioning advantage, and now they'll grab the Pyromancer, so two of the neutral objectives, the Gold Fury and the Pyromancer, goes down to OutCold.
But look at DeathPanter. He's on the opposite side of the map. Dimi's going to blink into the back line once he realizes that this is a 4v5 for OutCold Gaming. FrostiaK trying to dive even deeper onto StreakUp, but he's still alive.
He's up in the air and looking for some targets. He finds a knock-up onto one, but can the follow-up come through? StreakUp has some snipes, but this is given time for DeathPanter to road in. Fails, finds a double kill, and the Whirlpool locks in Breeze. Unfortunately for him, he goes down. That's 3 in a row for Simplicity, and they're going to head right to the FG with the AoE course.
Faeles and Genetics just put in work on that back line for Simplicity. OutCold Gaming had StreakUp completely on the run, and this enhanced Fire Giant, you would forget that it's enhanced at how quickly OutCold managed to burst that down. Dimi even giving a thought, I think, to try and look for the steal, but just never got the chance. By the time he rotates back in there, Simplicity have already dropped the objective.
That's just that's a perfect fight for Simplicity when they can group up in murder ball like that and slow everybody down and set up for Faeles to get in a position to start shredding through. It's exactly what they want.
That fight felt like it was definitely saved, though, because of Genetics, Faeles, and maniaKK bailing their Hunter out in time. Had StreakUp not managed to get up into the Astral Barrage, because I think that's what started to corral OutCold Gaming towards that right mid lane choke point. They just did not expect for that much damage to be put out so fast by Faeles. Genetics just knew what he was doing. He had the perfect CC chain, and that Gem of Isolation also putting in a lot of work for the Fafnir.
I agree, really slowing down Breeze. Look at this. They're even more committing into this attack speed build. I love it. I mean, the Shogun's now coming out for Genetics, and look at Breeze. He couldn't even afford to get a shell, or thorns, excuse me, because of how egregious these slows are. He had to pick up the sprint, and I think he did have to do that because it's so much that's coming out for this team, so they don't quite have enough to punish this attack speed focus build from them. There's no thorns, not really even any Nemeans or anything like that. Simplicity can all in on it.
It's the worst kind of spam.
Yeah.
From Simplicity. There's not a whole lot you can do about it other than find a pick. That's what OutCold need to do right now. Faeles could be an ideal target if Simplicity aren't too careful. This Arachne being left to his own devices might actually end up getting picked off. No, instead, OutCold Gaming not going to take their chances pushing any further. FrostiaK got a T2 tower in mid. Spudio managed to take down the T1 over in duo. So a little bit of gold trickling in for OutCold Gaming, and That's something that I think that OutCold have had going for them this entire match. They've definitely kept up in terms of itemization.
Simplicity able to find a tier 2 tower, but even still, not a significant lead for them just yet. This is where they can build it and manufacture it, though, by grabbing these towers, Taco. The tier 1's certainly going to go down in mid. No reason to come out and contest that. But what about these tier 2s? It's still so close. Do you want to see them come out and defend those, or should, at this point, do you just fall back to Phoenixes?
I think OutCold can look for safe poke, but if things get a little bit too risky, then you just hard disengage and back off. Of course, that's a chance that OutCold don't even want to take, and I kind of understand it because all the Gem of Isolation slows, maybe OutCold thinking they wouldn't be able to disengage if they get caught.
Genetics hops in, they're going to go in. Draconic Corruption has already been dropped, and the AoE Chorus is there for StreakUp, and he shreds the Phoenix on the left-hand side. It's already down. Fails, though, pays for it heavily. His HP quite low, but it's FrostiaK who wants the Hunter. Beads are forced out, and he rolls away, but a sprint on both sides means OutCold can keep up the chase.
StreakUp now trying to pop his steroid and get some good DPS out into FrostiaK, gonna force out the Ratatoskr Purification Beads, but FrostiaK's so deep in the back line, doesn't matter. DeathPanter might have closed his eyes a little bit on that Kraken, but still looking for further damage.
He just wanted to make sure FrostiaK couldn't get in on him and do any damage. maniaKK now is the one that needs to disengage, but he's sticking around. Even at this low HP total, he's not worried about the damage coming out from OutCold. And PrettyPriMe dashing aggressively. maniaKK goes down. The Agni not letting you get out of here. Too hot in the kitchen.
Keep an eye on StreakUp, though. These Whirlpool Gem of Isolation slows starting to apply as well, but Dimi didn't get the Wingblade proc that he was hoping for. Faeles gonna get caught out, though, from the Agni bomb stun, but not enough damage out of PrettyPriMe to actually kill this spider.
But still did significant damage. I love the way they played that. Genetics was StreakUp's bodyguard in that last fight, making sure that Hunter could survive. But this is good from OutCold to find something. They come grab the tier 2 tower in the lane where the fire minions have now spawned to at least push those minions up and force back Simplicity. But at this point, the damage might already have been done. They have a way into the Titan.
And that's the bigger picture, Finch, is the fact that OutCold Gaming, sure, they might have successfully pushed Simplicity back. Sure, you might have killed maniaKK, but the Phoenix is toast. And without that Phoenix, your base is just breached. Now all Simplicity need is for one team fight to go in their favor. They don't even necessarily have to look for this next enhanced fire giant even. They can just utilize it as a means of baiting OutCold in to awkward positionings for a fight.
Very, very strong fight for Simplicity. And they did such a good job of peeling for these carries. Genetics was there to keep StreakUp alive in that fight. DeathPanter, I think, had to ult his feet to get away from FrostiaK. You're right, it definitely wasn't on anyone else. So I think that was to try and make sure that no one could go in on him. Faeles had his ultimate to get out when he got low as well. So they did such a good job of disengaging right up until the very end. They probably could have got all the way out without losing anyone. But still, I think largely that was very clean.
Yeah, it was a little bit of panic, I think, from DeathPanter, and mixed in with some intent to kill. He definitely wanted to kill FrostiaK. It's just that Ratatoskr a little bit too far out in front to be caught initially. Still, Simplicity, I think, all things considered, they were so focused on just killing that Phoenix alone. I love what Genetics did by just opening up the fight, because the last thing that OutCold were expecting, it felt like, was that Fafnir to just jump in.
I wasn't expecting it either. They did that all 5 back, and OutCold actually stopped the backs on one of them, and so Simplicity kind of are like, well, this is our time to go in, and Dimi picks now as his time to go in, but he uses that combat dodge to disengage. Fatal Strike allows him to get back to his team. Now FrostiaK can come into the back line, but he's not an Arachne. He doesn't have quite enough damage. Doesn't even make it up into the sky. Faeles brings him down, but Breeze returns the favor by removing maniaKK.
Oh no, Breeze is going nowhere fast. Got caught inside of that Whirlpool. The sprint has been popped. He's still on the getaway. PrettyPriMe, however, going to be made the next candidate of choice since Breeze was able to get away. Airstrike's good for Spudio. Going to bail him out of danger. But this enhanced fire giant, there's no one to play defense now for OutCold.
And they've got to go back and stop these fire minion waves as well. And honestly, if it comes down to burning the objective, maniaKK might be the least valuable person. The rest of this squad is so good at burning down the FG. They now claim it for themselves, and they'll be able to re-aggress. Left side Phoenix will respawn shortly. They'll make that their target almost for sure. But keep these waves pushed up and they can spread around. Taco, what went so well for Simplicity in that fight?
It was just FrostiaK blinking in too deep. After Dimi
was
went
curious.
in, because Dimi blinks in, and it's understandable because Dimi's an Achilles, he's also got wing blades, so if he gets clipped by a whirlpool, he's zooming out of there usually. But when FrostiaK blinks in, DeathPanter just slaps him right in the face with a tidal surge, immediately pushes FrostiaK into a position where he's then surrounded by StreakUp, DeathPanter, and Faeles, and it leaves FrostiaK no other option except to try and go for the getaway on the through the Cosmos, but the wind-up time is just too long. Faeles ends up finding the last hit, and once Faeles gets that Bloodforge proc, the passive's sure to follow. He just starts moving in.
He must have been trying to see if he could bait out some relics, like blinking in and finding some stuns and forcing these carries to use relics, because it's not like he's the Arachne like Faeles. At this point, I don't think he wins the 1v1 against anyone or any of the carries the way that Faeles would if he can blink into the back line. So just a little bit too much from FrostiaK, and you're right, he does get punished right away.
Unless DeathPanter uses the Kraken on Dimi or whoever decides to initiate for OutCold Gaming, I don't think FrostiaK can go in. I think he has reached the stage of the match now where you hit that late game Ratatoskr stride, and it's either make it or break it. It feels like from a jungler point of view, and I say that because you run the mid to early game with Rat usually.
Yes.
FrostiaK wasn't able to do that this game. Simplicity played things incredibly passive at the start. I think because they were expecting to just dominate through objective play. And to be fair to OutCold, I think OutCold has actually done a fantastic job at keeping things relatively even in terms of objectives secured for both of these teams. But OutCold have just never had a single opportunity to try and work their way for an enhanced Fire Giant or even the regular Fire Giant. Simplicity just feel a little bit too farmed up now for FrostiaK to have that serious sort of impact. The best thing he can hope for now is a sick through the Cosmos that's going to set up PrettyPriMe.
That's about all he can look for. Or maybe he can be the last initiator once some relics and everything have been burned already, but it's hard for him to find truly his impact the way that he could early on. Remember, they looked for those red buff invades and couldn't find them.
And I know what you guys are probably thinking, well, why doesn't Breeze just initiate? It's because if Breeze initiates, the backline is fully exposed. FrostiaK might even die before he has a chance to even try and up on the left side of the map. Faeles gonna go in and get the solo kill in mid lane, maybe even the Phoenix. Left side Phoenix also being burned.
And there's no one, as you said, to stop Faeles. You have to wait for the next minion wave, but the left side Phoenix is already a distant memory, so Breeze and Prime rotate to mid to try and keep it standing, but now a flank possible for Simplicity. They give it up, though. They just leave maniaKK on that side, and with a full minion wave, they can start burning the mid Phoenix as well. OutCold cannot make it into position in time to defend, and just like a typewriter, they move over to the right side now, grabbing the speed buff as well. Why not add injury to insult?
Oh no, this is a fat wave as well for Simplicity. All these archers that are just going to be so annoying for OutCold to try and prevent Simplicity from taking this final Phoenix on.
That is a big wave, but Agni is a big clearer. He burns those away, but that's his dash, and so now he's a target for Faeles, who just keeps right on pushing through and hunts him down. Kraken comes through as well, but Spudio has the ultimate that lets him reposition. maniaKK in some trouble too, but he's just the bait. Breeze goes down to the whirlpool. The wave's too strong. Dimi in some trouble as well. Has to fatal strike away, but the Titan doesn't have that same escape path. Simplicity take down game one.
And that was just a quick collapse, I think, of OutCold inside of their base. Yeah. But I love the way the Simplicity handled this match and the way that they chose to approach these mid to late game team fights. I think Faeles, honestly, standout job for the jungler. I mean, had it not been for Faeles finding that initial pick on the mid Phoenix on FrostiaK, who's to know what could have happened?
There was also that fight by like those back harpies on the right side of the map that went in favor of Simplicity. They were able to keep StreakUp alive throughout that fight, and Faeles found a couple kills there. That really felt like a big turning point for me as well. But really, for me, what stands out is just the peel that they had for those back lines. It was so strong.
It felt like Fafnir and Bellona were just so impossible to deal with.
Yep.
StreakUp the entire time was just sitting in that backline having time of his life, honestly.
That's right, man. Wish I can get some coverage like that when I'm in the backline, right? That was real nice.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, man. Like, come on, give me some of that. Like,
yeah, keep my man alive. But a great game there for Simplicity to grab game one. Still, though, plenty to go in this set. Let's get it back over to the desk for their thoughts.
John and Taco on the cast, thank you. And of course, Simplicity taking this one, looking real clean. New players, but still the same result, unfortunately, for OutCold.
Don't think it had anything to do with Breeze on the Kuzenbo in
No.
that game. I think a lot of it came down to the team fighting presence. FrostiaK getting too overzealous on the Ratatoskr several times. I took note of it, specifically at the 10-minute mark where he was behind those back camps, the left side dual lane, trying to blink in aggressively under the tier 2 tower, but he was in combat. You can see the mindset from FrostiaK. And there's only one speed for him, and it's just constantly go, go, go. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him that game.
Especially understanding the mentality of the Ratatoskr. You want to get that early game, you want to get that mid game, and unfortunately he was just unable to do so. To be fair, across the way, Faeles didn't exactly have that early game either, because this game really existed in this mid to late game. It was about, you heard Taco talk about StreakUp just able to free cast from the back. That's because the front line looked so damn good.
That's right. StreakUp doing a good job cleaning up the kills with a Rama ultimate. Didn't have the most damage in the world in those fights because the front line from OutCold Gaming a little bit too far back, as even with Shogun's Kusarion, Maniac's Bellona, the Fafnir Coerce, you would think that the Ram would have a lot of damage, but the game didn't last that long because a lot of more damage was coming out from Faeles and DeathPanter instead.
Don't forget, one of the big changes that Arachne has had recently is her ult's kind of a team fight ult now. When she lands, there's all that slow, and that's a really big deal when you're looking to control everybody in. She lands down, Whirlpool, nobody's moving, and then that Kraken's going to hit everybody, so a nice look for sure.
And a very important win in the 1v1 category when Faeles was sieging under that middle Phoenix. We're seeing FrostiaK try to defend it, could not win that 1v1, and with that 5-on-4 power play, very easy cleanup for Simplicity to find the first game victory.
These are the type of plays that Simplicity need to internalize and then continue moving forward. Looking at the team as a whole, this is really what made the team win, was everybody coming together and finding that squad synergy.